So I'm so excited to be here to talk about what we all feel is a very important topic, which is tech literacy and bridging the digital divide within communities that have been impacted by mass incarceration. So just to give you a couple numbers, there is currently about 2.2 million people that are currently incarcerated in America. Now that means federal prisons, state prisons, city and county jails, juvenile detention centers, immigration centers, as well as people who are coming from transitional housing and people who are on home confinement. Now, specifically with Massachusetts, there's about 16,000 people that are currently incarcerated. Now, that may seem like a small number. If you look at from a per capita realm, for every 100,000 people in Boston, it's about 242 people that are incarcerated. The majority of people are in city jails, and then you have state jails. Now, while that may seem to be a small number, it's smaller than the national average, which is about 616 for every 100,000 people. It's still higher than many nations, such as the United Kingdom, which has about 120 people for every 100,000 that are incarcerated. So the United States as a whole incarcerates more people than any country around the world. And to quote Mumia Abdul-Jamal, it's Incarceration Nation. So I'm sitting here with two experts within the field of reentry as well as battling recidivism. I'd like to dig into you all's background, so if I can have the lady go first, please.
It would be my pleasure. My name is Brittany White. I go by Britt, and I'm originally from Dayton, Ohio. I stem from a two-parent household where my parents both worked together over the course of their marriage to get undergraduate degrees and their master's degrees. And my father fulfilled his and my mother's dream to leave Ohio and move to a major city like so many people, and we relocated to Dallas, Texas. And not even a full year later, my dad woke up and had a seizure where we discovered that he had a malignant brain tumor, and we would spend the next 27 years navigating the raggedy healthcare system that we have here in America. And over the course of the time that I watched my dad struggle with his illness, I truly believe that money was the solution to all of our problems. If we had better access to better doctors, then maybe he would still be able to have a better quality of life. But what I realized is that the impact of poverty, you can't out-hustle poverty. You can't outwork the implications of generational poverty and deprivation. Unfortunately, we lost my dad suddenly in January of this year. And that experience, thank you both, my favorite human, that experience really pushed me to build out the legacy that is the Shelley Felton White Institute. And it was about giving people who have grown up with that experience of deprivation the opportunity to collectively come together to build power, to change the systems that have oppressed so many of us. And so throughout my experience working and believing that money was the solution to all my problems, when I was 23, like so many of my justice-impacted peers, I was incarcerated in the state of Alabama. I do not recommend that if you get incarcerated anywhere that you choose Alabama. I was living in Atlanta. I was pulled over on I-20, which goes through the South for all my Northeasterners, goes straight across the South. And my car was illegally searched, and I was later convicted of trafficking marijuana after losing trial. And it's important for you all to know that I exercise my right to go to trial because so many people don't. And they just understand the beast that is the state that has so many of the resources, and they accept convictions whether they're righteous, guilty, or not. After being incarcerated in every single institution in the state of Alabama, I came home with a deep desire to do something without knowing what something was, and was able to find community organizing as a volunteer through my church, which started my trajectory into the work I do now.
Wonderful. Mr. Gentry?
I'm still vibing off your story.
Just blown away.
I mean, my background was a little different. My upbringing was a little different. I come from a broken home. I come from, and I shared some of this earlier, but I come from, appreciate that. I come from a young age of addiction, substance abuse. I come from parental figures who've been incarcerated, who were addicted to drugs, and wasn't the best parental guidance for us at a younger age. I come from a background of gang influence where I'm turning to other people to help guide me through a life that I felt I wanted, I looked up to, I inspired. And I remember being a young age and looking up to my older family members who, were gangbanging out there. And like I had a cousin in particular that he beat a murder case in our town. And I'm like, everybody looked up to him. And I'm like, man, I want to be like that when I grow up. I want to follow in those footsteps. And I remember I started going down that pathway. I hated school growing up with a passion. I had a stepdad that, he dropped out of school, so he like absolutely understood that lifestyle. So it became easy for me to just, fall into the streets. I dropped out of school. I'm on drugs. I'm drinking. And before I know it, I turned 18 years old, and I thought like I was a grown ass man at that point. I mean, I felt like that as a teenager, just like, man, you couldn't tell me nothing. I was ready to go live my life. And I found myself ripping through the streets. And at 18 years old, I found myself facing 25 years of life for a murder charge in our town. And like sometimes I just reflect on that because I'm like, I feel like I wasn't supposed to be here. I wasn't supposed to be in a position that I am today or doing any of the work I do today. Because I'm somebody that looked at that and everybody telling me like, man, you can beat that case, homie. Like, man, they got people with contradicting stories. Like, there's a bunch of witnesses there when we did it. And so people kind of like, man, take it to trial, man, take it to the box. And I took a deal. I'm like, man, it was me and my brother fighting the case. And me and my brother was like, man, they're offering this deal. So me and my brother just jumped on it. I'm like, man, I think they got us. I think we're going to spend the rest of our lives. So we both took a deal. We both went off to the pen. I took a manslaughter. I did 6 years. And I felt like I came home with no guidance. And I'm from California. I'm born and raised in the Bay Area, Vallejo, California. And I come home from the California state penal system. And they've added this R on their rehabilitation onto their penal system name. But I felt like I came home with no rehabilitation. I came home with no job skills, no guidance, no educational skills. And then I hit back to the town, and I'm like my older cousin. I remember like the homies, man, Big E back home. Like, okay, I'm right back to my mom's house, so everybody to come through. And I felt like that, like a chip on my shoulder. I'm in my hometown. Everybody knows we were involved in, and I'm just right back in it, kicking it with the homies. And I feel like within 2 months, I only made it 2 months, but I feel like I fell victim to a statistic of recidivism. And I think in California, it's like a 90-something percentile of the like people who come home within their first year that go right back to prison. And this time I found myself, I'm in Oakland. I caught a case out there, and I'm facing life again. This time they're trying to strike me out. This is my second term. They're using a strike from my first case, and they're trying to charge me with 2 on my second. And now I find myself at 24 years old, facing life in the penitentiary again. And I'm like, man, facing 25 to life, I ain't even 25 years old to be facing life again. And then once again, I found myself being offered a deal. I got a 2-year deal. I went back to the penitentiary, and I'm like, man, I'm that damn idiot who's like, I ain't never going back up. I hate it in here. I don't want to be around a bunch of dudes my whole life. Like, and then I went right back in there. I'm the idiot that go right back in. I got homies writing me like, damn, homie, I thought you weren't coming back. And I still didn't change. I didn't go back. I didn't have that spark when I went back to prison. I still went and did my thing. I still come home. I still didn't have any rehabilitation. I didn't learn anything new. But I felt like the one thing in my life that saved my trajectory was a woman in my life. That was like one of the most solidest people that I've ever known. And we were just barely dating, like that 2 months, like barely dating. But man, she coming out to Oakland. She seen me in this little ratchet jail. She told me about all the fights of the baby mama and the girlfriends fighting out there. So I'm like, man, she's going through all this just to come see me. She's driving 6 hours to the penitentiary to come visit me in the pen. And I'm like, man, she's solid. And she was going to college. She had just got accepted to the university, and she used to talk to me about school. Like, man, why don't you give it a shot? Why don't you try it when you come home? And I'm like, damn, girl, like I'm a high school dropout. I'm a 2-time convicted felon. Like, what the hell is school gonna do for me? How is school gonna save me? I'm like, what does it even have to offer? But so we would just rap a little bit, and when I came home, I got a job in a little warehouse. It was the only job that didn't do a background check on me because I was getting denied left and right, and I get this little funky warehouse job. And in 2 months, I found myself, I still have a lot of behavioral issues, and I go off on my manager, I get fired. And it just so happened that I get fired, and the school semester is about to start, and my lady's like, see, I told you, you'll get financial aid. They'll give you money to go to school. And I'm like, what? They'll pay me? Like, might as well go try it out then. If they're gonna pay me money, I can go sit in the classroom. And that right there sparked this whole trajectory. It was an English class. I didn't know how to write an essay, but I loved to read books, like reading hundreds of books when I was locked up. And my wife was like, man, or she's now my wife, she's now the mother of my children. But at that time, she's like, man, that's all school is reading a book and regurgitating that back to a teacher in the form of an essay. And I'm like, okay, let's give this a shot then. And all you had to do is show me how to write this paper. And once I had that down, like I'm acing classes, I'm getting straight A's. I go on to graduate high honors. I go get my bachelor degree. And I'm like, okay, I got a vision. Like I know a bachelor degree will get me into the field. Once I got that degree, I found out like I felt kind of stifled. Like I feel like I got a lot more. So I decided to go back to school while at the same time having kids. And I go get my master's degree. I got my master's degree in social work, and actually just a few weeks ago, after fighting the California State Board for like a year, they granted me my associate clinical number to become a licensed social worker in California. And that was a big moment, like for myself. And I feel like this is something I shared like earlier about something. I feel like my whole trajectory has just been paving ways. Like I didn't have the work I do, like currently, I didn't have that when I was going through school, but I felt like I'm paving the way for people coming after me for sure.
Wonderful. Now, this is a two-part question, y'all. So, being that you two have unfortunately served time, and being that we're talking about tech literacy, the questions are this: what is the technology access like inside? And one of the things that all three of us talked about was that there's almost this initiative to sort of push you into more manual labor jobs instead of just using our brains and using our soft skills. Can you two talk about that? I'll let Britt go first.
Well, first, it differs state to state, and the federal system, of course, looks different from the state systems. So once again, I'm speaking from the experience of someone who was incarcerated in good old Alabama, and I was incarcerated, for context, from 2009 to 2014, and the access to technology that I had was the phone. And my calls to my family were $25 for 15 minutes. And oftentimes my family would put money on the phone and the system would glitch and it would take the money and cut those phone calls short. And that's important because my support system was not in state. So my family was not able to come visit me because they were in Texas. My father was sick. And we also had something called a law library. I don't know if you look like a young group, but back in the early 90s, the print on the computer used to be green and orange. Do we remember that, anybody? When that font used to be green, that is what the law library looked like. And it did not have any internet access at all. It had like a catalog, like a library catalog where it could look up and reference cases, but you had to write it all down. There was no printing access. And then there was a black market, because there's a black market economy within the prison system. And they had a few cell phones. These were often flip phones that people would use oftentimes to keep in contact with their family members and their support systems. And if you got caught with a cell phone in prison, worst case scenario, you could get an escumbia charge. An escumbia charge is like you try to escape out of prison, and it immediately raises your custody level, and you have to go back into a maximum security prison.
And so, Brittany, being that you're inside, and that a lot of the jobs or a lot of the education may be okay. You can be a barber, you can train to be a forklift person. Why do you believe that there was no sort of initiative to say, hey, maybe you can be a database engineer, maybe you can be a software programmer? Why was that not pushed for you?
The trades offered in prison while I was incarcerated was automotive, secretarial. You could take cosmetology and learn how to do old school finger waves from the 90s, or you could take like plumbing. My issue was two things with the trades in the state and Department of Alabama is, number one, I'm a feminine woman, and I was not going to come home and be a plumber. I was not going to come home and work on your car. Do you see these nails? And not to talk trash about women who want to leave that life, but I came home and learned, like, now you could be a lash tech. And you could learn to get certified and put lashes on. And you could go home and set you up an Instagram that says hashtag Boston Lash Tech, and you could immediately build a clientele. And those are the type of opportunities that women need when they come home. Because when I entered into society, I had probation fees every month. So I was immediately in need of access to card hold cash in order to pay for my bills. And I had already been a financial burden on my family for the last 5 years and was anxious to reestablish my independence. Secretarial class, very similar to the law library, was you learning how to type so many words per minute, to take shorthand notes. And it was just like I was stuck in the 80s and the 90s. These were not transferable skills that were actually current and making anybody competitive in a modern job market. And the incentive behind that, to address your question, is because it is a financial benefit to the state of Alabama if you recidivate. They get money for each person who is incarcerated. So rehabilitation is not what the Department of Corrections is in the business of, because it would essentially put them out of business.
Love it. Eric?
I mean, my experience very similarly. Like we didn't have no form of technology when I was incarcerated. Very similarly, phones in California, it was $15 for a 15-minute phone call. So not quite as much, but I definitely felt like you trying to call your family for 15 minutes and running through a few of those, going through hundreds. And I definitely, even my lady, like she putting stuff on a credit card. Like, man, call me all the time. Like, I mean, my phone calls to her was impactful, so she wanted me to call. But it becomes a big burden instantly. But as far as technology, like very similar in the state of California when I was incarcerated, and which I shared as well, was like when I went down, I remember cameras on a flip phone were really big, and I was incarcerated from 2005 until 2012, so 5 to 12. And I went down where like sidekicks and flip phones were big, and I come home to like, I mean, computer on the iPhone. And I'm like, I'm lost. I come home, I'm looking lost in the phone store. I got my big sis with me, RIP, and I'm like, man, sis, like, and I remember asking her, like, man, like what kind of, what's the best phone out here? What's the phone people want? And she just told me iPhone. Everybody got an iPhone. Then I want that. I want the iPhone for sure. Didn't know how to use it. Didn't know nothing on it. But I come home, like, I felt like everything was foreign to me coming home. And I definitely know, like, I do work inside the carceral systems in California. And I see folks like, in Oakland, we got tablets, but it doesn't have access to all of the databases, our phones and stuff, where it's not teaching people how to come home and navigate and use their phones to their benefit or use a laptop to their benefit. When we got laptops for our classes inside, they put so much parameters where their IT was meeting with our college IT, and I'm probably getting a little ahead in like some of the work we do, but it was just so much dampers on like what we can do. Essentially, they wanted this laptop, they said, to look like an ATM system where it only had Microsoft Word, They could open that up, and then like half the fellas didn't even know how to type on the dang thing. So even that was like pointless by the time all this work we did to get laptops in there. Their tablets, similarly, like you couldn't do any schoolwork or classwork. And then I was also seeing like, in the juvenile hall system where they would allow folks to have, only in like, it was called a step down program. So up in the hall, like in the main hall, they didn't have no technology access, but if you got stepped down, like you were doing good and they were helping you transition back home, you had a little bit more access and you could take some college classes, but they would also put so much security parameters where they would only let you access like the Canvas, like everything that a college class is on. So if your teacher put a YouTube video that they wanted you to watch and that video opened up outside of Canvas, which you don't even think about that as a teacher, you're just uploading it like everybody else you would, you couldn't even watch that video. And if your whole homework was based on you watching this video and doing something, you're bombing this class because you can't watch this video. So I've seen that. I've seen it where my own experience with nothing, and I felt like even the battles you would get to get a little bit of technology ends up being ineffective and pointless.
Wow. Being that you two have avoided recidivism, and being that we're talking about the tech literacy gap, if someone comes home today, like for example, last year I did a TEDx at Farmington Correction Center, and I was talking with guys who were from around my neighborhood back home, and they had been down over 10 years. Talk about how learning about technology can help people avoid recidivism and why that is so important. I'll let Eric go.
All right. And I'm actually, like I said earlier, I'm somebody who recidivated a couple times. Appreciate that. Recidivated a couple times, actually. My first time going right back to prison, I caught a couple little cases that, fortunately for me, ended up being misdemeanor cases. But I felt like I'm somebody who, like, it took me a long time to learn. That's a whole side context. But I felt like, and this is something that I do talk about with LeRon, like, I'm big on the impact of like not just second chances, but another chance. Cause like for me, I'm somebody like, it took me a whole bunch of chances where something finally clicked and I felt like, all right, now it's starting to work out. So I definitely feel that. Remind me the question again, because I got a little sidetracked.
I was asking, how can
learning technology?
Learning technology avoid recidivism.
I was getting so tracked in my own little side story that
I know you all good, man.
I was like, oh yeah, what was the question? But it came back because definitely what I was thinking of too. And I shared this story with some folks before, but doing work at the college. So I'm working at this college. I'm co-founding programs, helping people like myself transition home from incarceration to the college because it was so impactful on myself. I found this need to do that. But now I'm starting to get people home who've done 10 years, 15 years, in and out the pen their whole life, and now they're 47 years old. One person in particularly, and I think I have I can probably run through dozens of stories, but one was so impactful on me, somebody who had been down since the 80s, and he had just came home a few years ago. He's almost 70 years old. He had been down 40 years on a case that he was supposed to only do 20-something years, and on a case that he, to this day, is like, I'm innocent. I didn't, it was a self-defense case, and he got whooped over the head, and he comes home, and he's lost, but he's so focused on school, he's so dedicated to education, and he took a lot of college classes while locked up. But mind you, these were like correspondence, like classes through the mail. And I was trying to remind him, like, hey, like, bro, like you might have done 6 classes at a time while inside, but I'm telling you from firsthand experience, 6 classes at a time on the streets is not the same. Like a seasoned student would be struggling taking 6 classes at a time, let alone an almost 70-year-old man just coming home from the pen. But he was like dedicated. And I watched him struggle from the gate, navigating his laptop, getting access to the Canvas. Like we provided him all the tools, a laptop, it had all the software on there. He had everything put in front of him, but he didn't know how to use it. So I feel like it was of no help to him. And I'll never forget a day he came into the office. He was trying to get me a phone number to contact like someone that was a support system to him. And he was trying to give me the name and the number, and he pulled out a damn notebook. And he's flipping through a bunch of pages. It reminded like when I was in the pen, like I had so many numbers written down. I knew the exact page I could flip through and call so-and-so. And he pulled out this notebook and he was flipping through about 15 pages before I stopped him. I'm like, look, bro, you're gonna take 45 minutes trying to find that name and number. And I'm like, have you ever thought of just using your phone? And he was like, what? Like the phone could do that? And I'm like teaching him on the spot. Like, man, you could pull up either the note system, you could put the contact in your phone. But like, even if you just utilize notes, I'm like, and then you couldn't even think of the name, but you do like the type of work they did. You can type that in there. You can find like the note you're looking for from 8 years ago on your phone, let alone trying to flip through a notebook. And I started to dedicate a lot of time to this individual on just how to navigate life. Like a lot of it didn't even have anything to do with his class or anything. It's like, I have a medical appointment coming up in 4 weeks and I'm teaching him how to use his calendar and how to break up calendars between like schoolwork and personal and how to color code. And like, so I'm helping him like transition home. And then I started like a light bulb went off. Like, man, I could do focalized like groups. Cause I feel like the college, like in California, the Bay Area, like we're doing a good job on like getting the schoolwork to the people. We're getting the access to higher education to our incarcerated and formerly incarcerated populations. But I don't feel like people are pausing and recognizing how much we all take for granted, that we could all flip open the phone and navigate the calendar. I got an appointment in 5 months and it's already locked in my phone. I got the email I can scroll through and check. I can jump on my socials and just see what's going on there. We take all that for granted. And this individual, he didn't even know how to make a calendar invite. And then the most impactful piece for this whole story that I'll leave on this is he used to come to my office and ask me something that he knew he had already asked me a few times for. Like, hey, I know you explained how to do a calendar reminder. Like, man, bro, like, I don't mean to be a bug. I hate to bother you. And I had to stop him. Like, look, bro, like, I was you. I obviously didn't do 40 years in prison, but I was you coming home. Whereas all the support I'm giving you was my lady helping me. My lady's pulling up the blackboard and helping me navigate the online. She just had to get my homework opened up, and then I can do the rest of the reading and the comprehending and stuff. But I was fortunate, I was privileged enough to have somebody in my life walking me through that. But I'm like, all this was just as foreign to me. I didn't know how to navigate all this. I couldn't, type with my 2 thumbs at a high rate of speed. I couldn't do none of this stuff. I may make it, not to toot any horn, but I may make it look easy right now, but I've been home a long time. I've been home for some years now, and I've been at this for a while, and I'm trying to help you get to a point where all this is just as comfortable for you. So don't feel like you're a bother or you're bugging me, because I was like, at the end of the day, I'm getting paid to do this. The college is paying me money to provide this service. And this service is everything helping you to not become a victim of recidivism, and everything in our power to keep you on campus, to keep that spark alive, and have you succeed in college.
Brittany? Brittany?
What I would say to this question about the power of technology is, it is not constructive for us to look at incarceration as an isolated issue. Incarceration is usually compounded with poverty. And so first we have to examine, do children experiencing deprivation have access to the technology that they need in order to be competitive in society? And we know the answer is no. We know that many times children are parked in McDonald's parking lots to get internet access in order to finish their homework. And so then you grow up already at a disadvantage, and you go into the Department of Corrections where you are villainized for trying to pursue access to technology, and you often start to shun it. It becomes something that that you consciously avoid in order to avoid getting in trouble, and then you come home and you're behind the bar because now you have to go on LinkedIn in order to pursue a job. And first of all, you don't use a Yahoo email in 2025, or a Hotmail. You need a Gmail account, and you have
I
to
still do. I still do use
anybody who still has
Hotmail.
a Hotmail or a Yahoo account. You are a very responsible adult, and I commend you, and you should pat yourself on the back. And that's just that. But it speaks to trying to do 2 things at once: bring people up to speed on technology, and what you so beautifully illustrated, also bring up people's confidence and eliminate some of the shame that we have put on them as a society. So we have to address a multitude of issues when we talk about the advantages of technology to fight recidivism. You have to address poverty as well as incarceration and the issues in between.
Love it. And you addressed obviously poverty as well as kids, and that kind of leads me into my next question. I don't know if everyone understands the school to prison pipeline concept, which essentially either suspends or reprimands children to the point where they're out of the school system, and if you can't get a degree, if you're shunned from school, then you're going to embrace crime. And Brittany, earlier you had stated that that prisons that they build prisons or that they police areas by the zip codes. How can access to technology prevent the school to prison pipeline working? And I'll let Brittany go first.
I appreciate this question. I like to look at it from the perspective of zip code to prison pipeline, because so many of my colleagues, shout out to my local folks who are doing movement work, can point to the zip code in their community that is the most likely to send a person into the state or federal system. So I live in Dallas, and that zip code is 75216. And that's the most incarcerated zip code, not just in Dallas, but in the big ass state that is Texas, right? And when you go to 75216, you are going to see that there is no grocery stores. This is a community where people buy their groceries from like a Family Dollar or like a local corner store, and there isn't a lot of fresh fruit or vegetables. When you go to the playgrounds, you'll see that there are no basketball nets, and often the playgrounds are not functioning, so there's no infrastructure. They're heavily policed. I went to one community, one project in this zip code, and they told me I couldn't back my car in. Now, I'm a girl who I always back my car in because you never know what's going to happen. And they told me that that is a violation of the housing code in that area, and everyone had to pull their car in. And if you are policed in how you can park your car, then you can just imagine how heavily you are policed in your day-to-day life. The last thing I'll say about this community is that the reason they came together and began to organize is because all of the children would go into the mail room and rip open everybody's mailbox and throw everybody's mail together. And the parents were pissed. They were like, why are these bad kids unsupervised? But the issue wasn't about children going and tearing up mail. It was that they didn't have a functioning place to actually go be kids and be safe. I use this example to say that if that is the quality of life offered in 75216, where the education systems are not thriving, there's no access to healthy food, there's poor infrastructure, and all of the public health factors are failing within that zip code, how do you expect them to grow up and be thriving, functioning adults? But we have an expectation of adults without the responsibility of protecting and raising thriving children. And so the issue with incarceration is not just around technology, but it's how we care for kids. And until we can figure out how to meet the needs of children within our society, giving them access to technology and the things they need to thrive, then we will continue to lock people up and hide them that we can't figure out how to assist as adults.
I love what you just said. Two things about that, because it reminded me of when I was growing up. We had the Southeast Community Center, and it was such an integral part of our neighborhood. Because just thinking about, if my brother and I didn't have that place to not only play basketball, talk to teachers, be mentored, as well as eventually be a mentor, then I don't know where we would be.
And LeRon, I'm a rec kid. I grew up going to the Princeton and Parkside recreation centers in my local hometown of Dayton, Ohio, because my parents had to go to work. Whether they had to go to work and they had to go to school in order to improve our quality of life. So same.
And the second thing that I want to touch on, which I love what you talked about. It reminds me of what Dr. Burke Harris says. She came up with the concept. It's called ACEs. I believe at one point she was the Attorney General of Health. I apologize if I'm butchering her title, but ACEs meant adverse childhood experiences. So if you, obviously, if you grow up without a parent, if your parent is addicted, if your parent was incarcerated, if you don't have food, if you don't have a proper place to stay, these are indicators of how your life can turn out, which essentially leads you to that road to incarceration.
They're not just indications of the family's quality of life, but they're also indications of the ways that our public health systems are failing society, and we're not meeting the needs of people who need them most, and we're villainizing individuals instead of systems.
Love it. E?
Kind of building off, when you speak of zip codes in California, when there was a big influx of them building new prisons in California, what they would do was analyze third grade reading levels, and they can dictate that the inability to read at a third grade level was an indicator, a higher probability that you would go off to prison, and they would then build prisons around those communities, and that's how they would determine where they're going to put these new prisons and build those. So I think that, talking about school to prison pipeline, it starts as young as the third grade. And then just tying that back to my own personal story, I didn't have people in my life who had gone to higher education. I didn't have people in my life who had were even talking to us about college. My parents, and I'm I love them to death these days. I remember mom was like, man, bring C's home, please. Could you bring a C home? Because me and I come from a large family, blended family. There's 7 of us kids. And we're all bombing class. We're all failing school. And I feel like at the home, and I'm not putting any blame on nobody. So shout out moms if you listening. I'm not putting no blame on nobody. But I just feel like it did start in the home. That if your moon was a C, the stars that I fell on was an F. Because if I know that's all you expect out of me is to just bring a damn C home, I wasn't even bringing those home, and then I would kind of continue this on the profiling. So in Vallejo, we didn't have a lot of rec centers and things for you to do, but I definitely know I can go rip and run with the homies out there, and I'll never forget every time we got stopped by the police, they'll jam us up and what gang you is, Norteño or Sureño, that's how we got jammed up in our town, and I'm like, is this how you stop everybody? Is this how you just accusatory? I don't have any indication that I fall into anything. I'm a young little kid at that point, but I'll never forget that. And I just felt like that was a lifestyle that our system was pushing us into. We're like, you better start making that choice because that's where you're going to be. And then I will end this point on this, whereas in our hometown, the police department had labeled my entire family as a gang-affiliated family, and that followed me to the carceral system. So whether or not I wanted, I didn't even have a choice at that point, whether or not I wanted gang ties going to the California State Prison, they were following me. It's on my paperwork. Every time I show the homies, it's documented right on there from our police department that followed me all the way to the carceral system from a young age. And it was just from our family. We're just a group. We family. I got a large family in Vallejo. And I feel like that system and that approach is what funnels people into these carceral systems, the lack of support, and then the accusatory approaches towards our communities, along with the over-policing, is what leads to the higher volumes of our people becoming incarcerated.
One thing that I want to touch on, and I really want everyone to understand this is sort of a side note. When you look at these two folks, a lot of us have started from -50 to avoid incarceration or to even be incarcerated, to grow up with just a lack of a solid foundation, and to make it through the trials and tribulations, to become autodidacts, to essentially tell the system that, what you expect of me, I'm gonna go the opposite of that. It's kind of like what MLK said. People talk about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. Well, it's impossible to do that when you don't even have the shoes on. So I just want to I want to praise you too for what you have done. And I mean, you deserve all the accolades. Word up. I mean, straight up.
Appreciate that.
Thank you. Now let's talk about AI. Obviously, this is a technology that is, I know, right? Yeah, I just, it's not going anywhere. I mean, more and more every day, AI is not only becoming more of the fabric of our everyday life, but it's also replacing things. It's, in my eyes, it's causing people to not think as much. How important is it for us to embrace artificial intelligence when it comes to fighting recidivism, and helping people become more learned with technology? I'll go to Eric first.
All right. I spoke on this a little bit earlier, and I used the lens of the work I was doing at the college. So I definitely use like the ChatGPT. I use that as a focal point because I feel like that comes up a lot in higher educational spaces. But I did a lot of supportive group work around the topic of AI. Because I not only run a support program for people like myself on campus, but I do a lot of through the lens of my educational background through mental health. I do a lot of focalized, we do meetings every week. We do different topic discussions. And at one point, I don't remember what the topic was of that day, but I'll never forget when a student had a question to the group. And then somebody else, a newer student to our group, just chimed in real quick, bro, just use ChatGPT. And he was like, oops, did I say that? And I was like, I'm glad you did, actually. I'm like, no, let's talk about that. Because I do feel like, especially in the world of higher education or writing, especially for our population who has spent a long time incarcerated, there are benefits to the tool. It can sometimes spark ideas. You can run a prompt through there and get some word prompts out of there. Or I was using employment as a factor earlier when we were talking, whereas I feel like we're oftentimes excluded from job markets, either through the gaps in our resume, or especially I feel like through the lens of a Eurocentric lens that our higher education system comes from and our employment market leans on. I feel like we don't often know the coded words that these AI tools that jobs are using pull from the resumes. So our resumes, on top of the gaps on there, just doesn't have the right language that is being looked at to even get the damn interview. So I would run on you create the resume, you put the verbiage on there, but then let me show you how you can pull up the job description that you're looking at. You can run that through ChatGPT. You can run your resume on there and make sure that my resume has the coded, what the job description's asking for, and lean in like that. I feel like that's a positive tool. It exists. It's there to be used. Use it. And I also feel like I do feel like people pretend they don't use it. I've seen this in my job and the work I do, where they act like they're, I don't never look at ChatGPT. And I look at the computer and I see it on. I'm like, okay, now be real with yourself first before anything else. But then I've seen the flip side of it, where I often feel like our population is often demonized more in the higher educational systems for using, when they're claiming that, ChatGPT wrote somebody's whole paper. And I often feel like because somebody comes from the backgrounds we come from and we're in these higher educational systems, we're just assumed that we don't know the language, that we can't speak on that he doesn't, because maybe in his day-to-day he doesn't speak eloquently, that he can't spend time at the house reading on the same material all the other students are reading and write a beautiful paper. So they just assume as much. And I've seen that where I feel like the numbers are skewed higher towards the student population that I support on campus, where I often help people advocate against the punitive system when they have to go stand up and prove that they spent the quality time writing, and I have to justify that I spent time working ideas with them. I've looked at some of the rough draft of their papers. I've seen them put the work in. The student's telling me that he ran it through a system for the grammatical corrections, and he's now being demonized. And I'm like, well, what about others? I'm assuming other students must be using the same stuff. Why is it that I feel like more often than not, it's my student population that, falls victim of being accused of this not, of plagiarism or using an AI tool to write their papers? So I've seen that where AI can be a benefit, especially the writing tools of AI, can be a benefit for our population, especially using the folks who've been down for 40 years, and I'm trying to help them get on with a job. But then I also see the accusatory side where they're just being used against us.
So
Drive it home.
the elders have told me that one way that the civil rights movement actually gained traction is through television. And it was easy to ignore the plight of what was happening in the South when we relied heavily on those big old radios that you just tuned in and you would listen to it. But the Northerners in the country was shocked and outraged when those images came across their television screen, and they could no longer ignore people being hosed down and spit on and mistreated at lunch counters. And I see the benefit of AI being similar, that now we have the capability to create simulators and really give people imagery around what are the impacts and the experiences of incarceration. And so I favor it that way, but not without regulation, because some of those same elders who are teaching us these stories are being finessed and scammed by artificial intelligence that is presenting videos and imagery as if it's actual people when it's really someone else's imagination that is being used to manipulate people. I also will say this. Artificial intelligence is a tool, and it's a tool that is really targeted for cerebral, logical people, but it is not the end-all be-all. And if we rely on it too heavy as a society, then we take for granted the fact that intelligence exists in many different forms. The arts, people who put stuff together without looking at the instruction. First of all, I want to be friends, but that is a form of intelligence that we need to value too. So I think artificial intelligence is also an indictment on where we are as a society, on who we value to be brilliant, who we're comfortable condemning, and the fact that there is collateral in this perfect tool and who is harming.
Totally agree. So I'm gonna ask you to one last question if I can get a quick answer. And not that I'm not loving this.
I'll try.
But unfortunately, we do have time constraints. In your opinion, what is one thing that technology can do to help stem recidivism? And I'll go to the lady first.
I think technology creates relationships. Now we have the opportunity to talk to people who we've never met. And especially for people who are who have public health challenges or are system impacted, that's super important, because oftentimes you will be deemed and disqualified trying to navigate the system. Your resume won't be pulled, your application, your name will be too exotic to appeal that way. So it is often through relationships that we are able to access opportunity. And if we are able to create more relationships across larger networks, those are broader opportunities that folks may not have been able to get access to.
Eric?
Not as beautifully as put, but I definitely do feel like, in the sense of technology breeds access, it was like, I feel that wholeheartedly. And I see it a lot through the work we do at the college, where the stories I've shared earlier. And like I said, I got dozens of these stories in the sense of, these are people I'm watching coming home, and the people who are struggling with technology are struggling with access to their community, because everything we know is being digitalized, whether it's access to healthcare, whether it's access to food, or resources or support, or you're trying to get human services on the phone, or you're talking to an automated operator, or you got to go to the website to get some documents. Like, everything's digitalized in our world. And I'm watching the people who can't navigate these systems lack the confidence to continue on like trying to do good and trying to do the right thing. And I've watched people where it's like, I mean, it's easy for us to fall back in old behaviors. You know how hard I fought to change some of my ways. Like I said, I'm arrested and locked up a few different times. Aside from my 2 long prison stays, I feel like it took me a few times. So I felt like it's hard to do the right thing when all we've known is, you know, what we grew up with is that, you know, the breaking the law or the doing something different or you know, taking something because I don't have it and I want it. And I feel like to help somebody stay home, we have to teach them the tools on how to survive and give them the same access that we all take advantage of. And it does go back to that, where like we all of us do this every single day in our lives where we take advantage of knowing how to navigate this phone. And I do try to bring it back empathetically to the folks who are like, I was you, bro. Like I struggled coming home. I didn't know how to do anything. It was just as foreign to me. Like if there was an Eric on the other side of the desk when I was coming home, they would have been looking at me the same way. Like, oh man, let me help you. And I'm like, oh man, I'm not an idiot, man. I hate to be asking you a bunch of times. So I felt like, I mean, the way technology can help and assist us in not going back is to give us access to the things we need out here. Because at the end of the day, like, I mean, when you're tired of getting locked up, like you want to do right, like you want to do. But I also, like I said, man, them old ways and behaviors are easy to fall back on when like, man, I tried to go to school and it didn't work out, man. I can't get on the computer. I can't navigate that. The teacher ain't helping me. But like, man, I know the homie got a dope sack for me or something. I know I can fall back on that real quick. And you're not thinking of the long-term ramifications of like, bro, you tried that life before. It obviously didn't work. And now I'm meeting you on the outside coming home. So we know that don't work. Well, how about we try this new opportunity, give it a little shot. And I'm always somebody who like the same time and investment you took to like, be a successful whatever you were doing out there. Because, that didn't happen overnight either. Put that same time and energy into navigating some of these worlds and give it a little time to let those seeds, grow into fruit. Like you got to give it some time.
I love that. I think that, please, yeah. Eric was incredible. For me, what I'm gathering from you two, as well as my own thoughts, is that at the end of the day, the gap has to be bridged because technology is not going anywhere. Like AI is just going to become more and more and more prevalent, and if people who are coming home don't know how to do simple things such as access healthcare, apply for housing, apply for jobs, knowing how to work their phone, to being familiar with AI, then they're going to be lost. And when people are lost, as Eric says, they fall back on what they know best, and taking penitentiary chances can end up with having you in prison. 30 seconds.
Additionally, it's not just the learning curve, but it's also the way that the system is built with implicit bias that excludes those folks who are able to navigate the system.
You mean to tell me that the system excludes folks that look like us up here? Wow, I'm just shocked.
Not only folks who look like us, but also people who have particular lived experience.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, we're gonna take a couple questions from the audience. I love this question. What can institutions like the Museum of Science do to better engage and care for incarcerated and previously incarcerated communities? Brittany, I'll let you go first.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm here for it.
Brittany.
That's why I'm here. So my answer to that is, number one, to be in relationship. Like, I have had the privilege to pitter-patter around this museum a little bit, and this is actually a very wonderful place. It's full of treasures and knowledge that everybody should have access to. And oftentimes, when I'm in museums, I sometimes people watch, and I look at who has access and who has the time, who has the money, and who has the inner knowing to actually come and bring their children to explore these opportunities. And we should not make assumptions that just because people are not here, they do not have the desire to be here. Or if they came into this environment, that they would not be able to benefit or enjoy all of the wonderful exhibits that are offered here. And so my invitation to the museum is to continue to identify communities who need to be resourced the most and love on them and go get them, go pass out bus passes, give them Lyft, give them Uber codes to give here. We identified earlier, Eric was nice enough to point out that if you have an EBT card, then you and 4 guests can come to the museum for free. But if that's not marketed out in a way that is culturally accessible to the demographics who need it, then it's not beneficial. So not only do you make the invitation, but speak to people in their language and choose ambassadors and trusted messengers who can get that to those communities and bring them on in here.
Bro, I swear every time you just take it right out my heart for sure.
She does this a lot. So.
I'm big on like bringing it back to like real world and connecting to somebody in a real way. Like even in college, like I was on the debate team and I'd love to hear a bunch of jargon from somebody and just be able to break it down and and relate more in humanistic, I felt, terminology. But while I was in college, I despise science, no offense to the center. Like science was never something that, the classwork, the classes in and of itself, especially coming from like my lack of education, I felt like very excluded even in the college system. And actually like the first class I ever dropped and took a W in was my science class, that I had a teacher that was just teaching over my head and wouldn't slow the class down or wouldn't answer any of my questions. And a lot of like, oh, you remember that from high school to the class. And I'm like, hey, I don't. Like I dropped out of high school. I don't remember no formal education. I don't remember any science. So I felt like it was just being taught over my head. But I finally had a really good science teacher that would relate the class to real world. And I was sharing earlier, like we took a field trip and like, I remember like the basalt rock, which is like some of the formations of like some of how our mountains are made. We went to the Golden Gate Bridge and we went to the lighthouse and she's shown us the differences with the rock. And I could really just like, all right, I can see it now. I can see it in the real world. And then in my math class, I actually loved math when I was in college, and I'll never forget the way the math instructor he gave, and I don't remember the equation he was giving, but he related this equation. He was like, man, to give you a real world experience or an example, this mathematical equation is what Campbell Soup Company uses on their assembly line to determine mathematically how much of a can to fill up and how much airspace to leave in the can before they seal it. And that became very interesting to me. And similarly, when I was walking through here, I seen ways where like we got the river with the bridge and you're showing like how a structural bridge is supportive. It got the examples down there, like how you're stacking blocks together and how they fall in the middle. And I'm like, how real world does it get right there? We got the box down here where it's showing you how they, like they're cleaning water or sifting through water. And I'm like, we all utilize this stuff in here. And I feel like if we spent time making it relatable to, the bridges there's 1,000 of them around here, I feel like, just to get over here. So like relating that back to the community, like how we all utilize the science in here. We use this in our everyday lives and showing our people and relating this science back to our communities, I feel like would be vital.
Awesome, thank you. And the next question is, what are some of the technologies that are affecting incarcerated communities today? How can we prevent the impact? Eric?
The technologies that currently incarcerated people?
That are currently affecting incarcerated communities. Yes, sir.
Can I go first?
Absolutely.
All right, go ahead.
Oh, my laundry list of things. So first of all, it is these social influencers who we have made popular. And the best example that I have is I'm originally from Dayton, Ohio. And we have a website that's posts everybody's mugshots. It's who got locked up in Dayton. And the person who owns this website is not from my community. They live in middle America. It's an older white man who lives in like Montana somewhere, who has basically bought a website who posts these mugshots so that he can feed the gossip and scandal in this little city with a high incarceration rate where most of the people who are being incarcerated look like me. So it's the profit profiteers who are benefiting from scandal in these communities. But it's not just them. It is also these social media influencers, your Joe Buttons, your DJ academics, who get on here and fuel beefs. They scandalize rappers and speculate on their cases. They talk about communities like Chicago.
DJ Vlad, too.
Name them. They scandalize communities like Chicago, and they can't even go to a Chicago. They can't even go get gas in these communities, but they're telling you what you should think and what you should believe about them. They're fueling propaganda, and they're funded by big media outlets in order to do so. And so it's the way that technology is giving people who are not in relationship with these communities biases and prejudices to give them a formation to be in fear of people without an understanding of the real problems that these communities face or the systems that fail them. And they continue to profit and benefit from the scandal and the messiness that is in these communities. The last thing that I will say is the systems themselves, where there was a very public case in the state of Georgia. It was Georgia's first RICO case. And it was a rapper by the name of Young Thug. And Young Thug and his co-conspirators were accused of causing all of this scandal and fueling all of this criminal activity in Atlanta. Now, what was interesting is that Young Thug was incarcerated in the county jail in Fulton County. His girlfriend came to visit him to have a private visit and conversation. Now, ladies, I don't know if your man has ever been incarcerated, but you're kind of just pulling things out the sky to keep him motivated. How you doing? You look good, even though he's gaining weight because he's eating nothing but Cheetos. Whatever you say to your man in the privacy of that visitation room is your business. The sheriff, who is the person who is in charge of the county jail, allowed that very private moment to be released publicly for the whole country to listen in and watch that private moment. And these are the type of salacious and scandalous moments that technology allows people to have access to private moments and give them a sense of entitlement and profit off of it in a very disgusting way.
Damn. All right. And the distinguished point I was trying to make, or between incarcerated and people in the community, because I feel like one of the most impactful tools that impact us negatively, especially in California, but I'm assuming nationally, is the ankle monitoring system. I feel like this is used in a way that oftentimes negatively impacts our community. I've seen that where the ankle monitor is tracking you, and all of a sudden, especially with a lot of my people, you're going through what they call a gang injunction neighborhood. So a neighborhood is somewhere like you grew up with, all your family's there, your whole community's there, but they have deemed that you are not allowed to be in this neighborhood, and you can just be driving through. So you can be just passing down the main thoroughfare, and because this ankle monitor has now deemed that you are going into like a red zone, you become demonized from this. And I've noticed that the same companies that own and market these ankle monitors are the same companies that own the prison system. They're the same companies that own the reentry centers as well. So you watch this revolving door, like they're making money off you every which way at every point you touch this system. From coming home, and you got the ankle monitor that's not charging, so you're getting violated for having your ankle monitor off the system. So I feel like that in and of itself is one of the most largest tools that's impacting our communities the worst. And I've seen that myself, and I've seen that with peers around me, just the way it's marketed and used. And I just thought that was the most appalling piece of like, man, this same company is GEO is like the company that's making the damn monitor. They're owning prisons. And then like when I'm working at the college and they want to link with me, and I'm like, damn, I don't even my soul doesn't even want to allow me to work with you guys on the reentry side of it, because you're profiting off of our people every time I turn around. And half the folks got the damn ankle monitor on that your company's handing out. So I feel like that's most impactful for our community, and then it's often just sending people off and recidivating them.
Yeah, I'd be like, that's a no for me, dog. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna do that. Well, before we wrap up, I just want to once again give a shout out to the organizations that partnered with us for this wonderful event. Prisoners Legal Services of Massachusetts, Liberal Arts for Returning Citizens, Clark University, Thrive Community, Justice for Housing, Breezeway, Prison Book Program, the PD Green Program, and just a side note, if you don't know who PD Green is, you should really research him. To all my DC folks, y'all know who PD Green is. So. Tech Goes Home, the Fountain Fund, thank you so much. Inner City Weightlifting, because once again, health is wealth. Coming Home Directory, and the Office of Returning Citizens, City of Boston. I want to give a humongous thank you, and just it is truly a pleasure to share the stage with you, Brittany, as well as Eric. Just your wisdom and your insight. I'm pretty sure that it's made everyone feel great. It's made me feel great. I'm loving it. So can we just give a hand to these two wonderful folks?
Out the Mud Club. That's us.
And finally, I just want to say something. At the end of the day, we all strive to have a sense of equality, to have a sense of fairness, even though I really hate that word because, fair is where you get funnel cakes from. But if everyone does not have access to the same technologies, then it's always going to create this sort of digital caste system that just kicks people out and that does not allow them to truly live. Because in 2025, we have, we're able to access health records. We're able to order food. In San Francisco, they have a car service called Waymo, where it's self-driverless cars. Even though I believe a couple of days ago the car hit a bus, still it's like technology is everywhere and it's not going anywhere. And so we need to truly allow everyone access to be able to have access to the technology.